Hell's Angel sees a poor blind girl, abandoned at the bus stop. The truth left him stunned. The rumble of Cade's motorcycle echoed through the empty streets as he cruised past darkened houses and sleeping gardens. Streetlights cast long shadows across the pavement, their orange glow creating pools of light in the darkness. The cool night air whipped at his leather jacket, and his thick beard provided little protection against the autumn chill. His large hands gripped the handlebars tightly as memories of his past life flickered through his mind. The tattoos on his arms, remnants of his days with the motorcycle gang, seemed to weigh heavier tonight. He'd been trying to leave that life behind, spending his evenings riding alone through quiet neighborhoods instead of raising hell with his old crew. As he approached the bus stop on Cedar Street, the gleam of his headlight caught something, or someone, sitting on the bench. Cade eased off the throttle, his motorcycle's growl dropping to a low purr. The figure didn't move, or even look up at the sound of his approaching bike. Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today. Now back to the story. Drawing closer, he noticed it was a young woman. She sat perfectly still, her hands folded in her lap, clutching what appeared to be a white cane. Her dark hair fell forward, partially hiding her face, but even from this distance, Cade could see the lost, vulnerable expression she wore. Something about her stillness bothered him. Most people would at least glance up when a motorcycle approached, but she hadn't moved a muscle. The bus stop was in a decent part of town, but at this hour, no buses would be running. She shouldn't be out here alone. Cade slowed his bike to a crawl, studying her more carefully. Her clothes were neat but wrinkled, as if she'd been sitting there for hours. Her shoulders were hunched forward slightly, and though she held herself with dignity, there was an air of defeat about her that tugged at something deep inside him. He pulled his motorcycle to the curb, the engine's rumble dropping to an idle. The woman still didn't look up or acknowledge his presence. That's when he noticed her unfocused gaze. She was blind. The white cane in her hands confirmed his observation. Cutting the engine, Cade sat astride his bike for a moment, conflicted. His mother's voice echoed in his memory. Never turn your back on someone who needs help, Cade. But years of keeping to himself, of avoiding complications, made him hesitate. He was nobody's hero. His rough appearance alone usually sent people scrambling to the other side of the street. Yet something about this woman's solitary figure called to him. Maybe it was the way she held herself, proud but wounded. Or perhaps it was the gold locket that caught the streetlight as it hung around her neck. Whatever it was, he couldn't just ride away. Swinging his leg over the bike, Cade planted his boots firmly on the pavement. His movement caused his leather jacket to creak, breaking the silence of the night. The woman's head tilted slightly at the sound, but she remained still, her hands tightening almost imperceptibly around her cane. As he took a step toward her, Cade ran a hand through his thick beard, a nervous habit he'd never managed to break. The streetlight cast his shadow across the bus stop bench, and he saw her stiffen slightly, sensing his presence. Her face, now fully visible, showed a mix of vulnerability and resignation that made his chest tighten unexpectedly. He paused, just a few feet from the bench, suddenly uncertain. What could someone like him, with his checkered past and gruff demeanor, possibly offer to help this situation? But as he stood there, watching her sit alone in the darkness, he knew he couldn't just walk away. "Miss?" Cade kept his voice soft, trying to sound as unthreatening as possible despite his gravelly tone. "Are you waiting for someone?" Clara's head tilted toward his voice. Her fingers tightened around the white cane in her lap. "I'm waiting for the bus," she said quietly but firmly. "Last bus stopped running about 2 hours ago," Cade said, keeping his distance to avoid startling her. He watched as her composed expression faltered slightly. "That can't be right." Clara's voice wavered. "The schedule. I was told it runs until midnight." She reached into her pocket with trembling fingers, pulling out a crumpled piece of paper. "Those are the summer hours," Cade explained gently. "They changed the schedule last week for fall." Clara's shoulders slumped slightly, but she quickly straightened them again. "I see," she said, though obviously she didn't. She stood up, unfolding her white cane with practiced movements. "Then I'll walk." As she took a tentative step forward, her cane caught on an uneven part of the sidewalk. She stumbled slightly, catching herself before Cade could move to help. His heart clenched as he watched her struggle to orient herself. "It's not safe to walk alone at this hour," Cade said. "Let me help you get home." "I don't need help," Clara replied sharply, but her voice betrayed her uncertainty. She took another step, her cane sweeping in front of her. "I can manage on my own." Cade watched as she nearly stepped into a pothole. "Ma'am, I know you don't know me from Adam, but I've got a motorcycle. I could give you a ride home." He paused, then added, "My mother would never forgive me if I left someone stranded out here alone." Clara stopped moving, her cane frozen mid-sweep. "Your mother?" "She raised me to help people who need it," Cade said, the words feeling strange in his mouth. He hadn't talked about his mother in years. "I know I probably sound like some kind of creep, but I swear I just want to make sure you get home safe." Clara stood still for a long moment, her face turned slightly away from him. "How do I know I can trust you?" she asked finally. "You don't," Cade answered honestly. "But I'm offering you a ride home on my bike. You'll be behind me, holding on. First sign of trouble, you can push me off and take the bike yourself." A ghost of a smile touched Clara's lips at his practical suggestion, but it quickly disappeared. "I've never been on a motorcycle before," she admitted. "I'll drive careful," Cade promised. "Better than walking alone in the dark." Clara's fingers flexed on her cane as she considered. Finally, she nodded slightly. "All right," she said, her voice tight with apprehension. "But I have pepper spray in my purse and I know how to use it." "Good," Cade said simply. "You should." He moved closer, making sure his footsteps were audible. "May I guide you to the bike?" Clara hesitated before extending her arm slightly. Cade carefully touched her elbow, noting how she flinched at the contact before forcing herself to relax. As they walked toward his motorcycle, Cade felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Here was this vulnerable young woman, trusting him despite her obvious fear. What if he was making things worse by getting involved? He'd spent years keeping to himself for a reason. Nothing good ever came from him trying to help others. But watching Clara's careful steps, seeing the way she held herself with determination despite her obvious distress, he knew he couldn't have made any other choice. The motorcycle roared through the empty streets, its engine echoing off darkened buildings. Clara held tight to Cade's leather jacket, her grip firm but not panicked. The wind whipped at her hair, and despite the circumstances, she found herself almost enjoying the sensation of movement. "Left at the next light," she called over the engine's rumble. Cade nodded, slowing down to make the turn carefully. As they stopped at a red light, Clara's voice drifted forward. "I shouldn't be out this late anyway. My father was supposed to pick me up hours ago." Her words carried a weight that made Cade's shoulders tense. "He promised he'd be there." "Your father left you waiting at that bus stop?" Cade kept his voice neutral, but his hands tightened on the handlebars. "He does that sometimes," Clara said, trying to sound matter-of-fact, but failing to hide the hurt in her voice. "Shows up late, or not at all. But this time..." She paused as Cade accelerated through the green light. This time he actually came, drove up, rolled down his window and told me he couldn't do it anymore. Said he was leaving town. Cade's jaw clenched. Just left you there? He's been struggling since Mom died, Clara explained, her voice barely audible over the wind. She made him promise to take care of me if anything happened to her. I guess some promises are too heavy to keep. The motorcycle slowed as they approached another red light. Something about Clara's words nagged at Cade's memory. Your mother, he said carefully. When did she pass? 5 years ago, Clara replied. Cancer. Dad started drinking heavily after that. He'd always had problems with alcohol, but after Mom... She trailed off, then added, the only time he ever seemed truly sincere was when he made that promise to her. He swore he'd look after me, said he owed it to her because of some old debt. Cade felt an uncomfortable prickling at the back of his neck. This promise, he said slowly. Did your father ever mention why he felt he owed your mother? Something about her helping him years ago, when he was younger. He never gave me the details, just said she'd saved his life once. Clara's grip tightened slightly on Cade's jacket. He mentioned a friend of his had died, and my mom had been there for him during that time. Cade's stomach dropped. He knew of only one woman who had helped his childhood friend through a death, his own mother. Your father, he said, his voice rougher than before. What's his name? Tom, Clara said. Tom Matthews. The motorcycle jerked slightly as Cade's hand spasmed on the handlebars. Tommy Matthews, his best friend from childhood, the one who'd disappeared after Cade's mother died, the one who'd promised to get clean, to make something of himself, to honor the woman who'd tried to save him from his demons. Second house on the right, Clara directed, unaware of Cade's growing tension. Cade guided the motorcycle to a stop in front of a small, run-down house. His mind was racing, trying to process this impossible connection. Tommy Matthews' daughter. The same Tommy who'd sworn to Cade's dying mother that he'd turn his life around, who'd promised to help others the way she'd helped him. Are you okay? Clara asked, sensing his rigid posture as she carefully dismounted the bike. Your breathing changed. Cade swallowed hard. Clara, he said, his voice tight. Your father, Tom Matthews. I know him. Or I did, a long time ago. He turned off the motorcycle's engine, the sudden silence heavy between them. He was my best friend when we were kids. Clara's hand moved to her neck, fingers automatically finding the gold locket that hung there. The streetlight caught its surface, making the intricate pattern of leaves and vines shimmer. Cade's eyes fixed on the piece of jewelry, and suddenly he felt like he couldn't breathe. My mother gave me this, Clara said softly, running her thumb over the locket's surface as if reading its design. It's the only thing I have left of her now. Her fingers traced the familiar pattern, following each curve and indent with practiced care. Cade stepped closer, his boots scuffing against the concrete. The design was unmistakable, delicate vines intertwined with tiny roses, forming a heart shape. He'd watched his own mother polish that same pattern countless times at their kitchen table. May I? His voice came out rougher than he intended. When Clara nodded, he gently lifted the locket, careful not to pull on the chain around her neck. The metal was warm from her skin, and the weight of it in his palm brought back a flood of memories. It's beautiful, isn't it? Clara smiled, unaware of Cade's inner turmoil. Mom said it was special, that it had belonged to someone who knew the true meaning of love and sacrifice. She told me the story so many times I could recite it in my sleep. Cade's throat tightened. What story is that? She said it belonged to a woman who helped people, even when they didn't deserve it, someone who believed in second chances. Clara's voice grew softer. The woman gave it to my mother when she was going through a rough time. Said it would remind her that love always finds a way. The words hit Cade like a physical blow. He remembered the day his mother had given away her precious locket. She'd been sitting in their small hospital room, her face pale but determined. Tommy Matthews, Clara's father, had been there too, sobbing, promising to change his ways. "Your mother," Cade managed, his voice barely above a whisper. "Did she ever mention the woman's name?" Clara shook her head. "No, but she always said the woman was like an angel, that she saved not just one life that day, but two." She paused, her brow furrowing. Mom never explained what she meant by that. Cade released the locket, letting it fall gently back against Clara's collar. His hands were shaking. He knew exactly what Clara's mother had meant. His own mother had saved both herself and Tommy that day. Tommy had been about to drive drunk, devastated after losing his job. Cade's mother had stopped him, taken his keys, and spent hours talking him through his darkness. The guilt crashed over Cade in waves. All these years, he'd thought his mother's influence had died with her. But here was living proof that her kindness had rippled outward, touching lives he'd never known about. Clara had been out there all this time, carrying a piece of his mother's legacy without either of them knowing. He looked at Clara standing there, one hand still clasping the locket that had once belonged to his mother, and felt the weight of all the years he'd spent wrapped up in his own pain. While he'd been hiding from the world, this young woman had been struggling, abandoned by the very person his mother had tried so hard to save. The locket gleamed in the dim light, a silent testament to connections he'd never known existed. His mother's last gift had found its way back into his life through Clara, and he hadn't even known to look for it. The motorcycle rumbled to a stop in front of Cade's small house. The engine's growl faded into the quiet night, leaving only crickets chirping in the darkness. Clara's grip on Cade's leather jacket loosened, her hands trembling slightly from the unfamiliar ride. "We're here," Cade said, his gruff voice gentler than before. "It's not much, but it's warm and dry." He helped Clara off the bike, noting how she kept one hand on his arm while the other gripped her white cane. The porch steps creaked under their feet as they made their way to the front door. "3 steps up," he warned, guiding her carefully. Inside, Clara's cane tapped against the hardwood floors as she oriented herself. The house smelled of coffee and leather, with a hint of motor oil. Cade flicked on the lights, though Clara couldn't see them. "Kitchen's straight ahead," he explained. "Living room to the right, bathrooms down the hall, first door on the left, guest room's right across from it." Clara nodded, her face a mix of uncertainty and exhaustion. "Thank you," she said quietly. "I know you didn't have to do this." Cade moved to the kitchen, his boots heavy against the floor. "You must be hungry. I can make us something." While he worked on heating up some leftover stew, Clara found her way to the kitchen table, her hands skimming the surface before pulling out a chair. The wooden legs scraped against the floor as she sat down. "It's been a long time since anyone's cooked for me," she admitted, her fingers fidgeting with the locket again. Cade set 2 bowls on the table, along with spoons and some bread. "It's just beef stew, nothing fancy." They ate in silence for a few minutes before Clara spoke again. "I lost my sight when I was 12, she said suddenly, her spoon pausing halfway to her mouth. "Car accident. Mom was driving me home from dance class." Cade stopped eating, watching as she continued. "Dad, he couldn't handle it, started drinking more. Mom tried to hold everything together, but—" Clara's voice wavered. "She got sick 3 years later. Cancer. That's when Uncle Tom started coming around more." Her hands clenched around the spoon. He's Dad's brother, always asking for money, making promises he never keeps. When Mom died, he convinced Dad he could help take care of me, but all he did was take advantage. Cade's jaw tightened, but he remained silent, letting her speak. I learned to be independent, Clara continued, her chin lifting slightly. Got my own place, found work. But Dad and Uncle Tom, they keep showing up when they need something. Money, usually. Dad promised this time would be different. Said he was really going to help me. She gave a bitter laugh. Instead, he left me at that bus stop, just like always. Cade watched as she wiped away a tear with the back of her hand. His fingers curled into fists under the table, anger building at the thought of her father's betrayal. The same man who'd promised Cade's dying mother he would change, would be better, had abandoned his own daughter. Uncle Tom will probably show up soon, Clara said, her voice smaller now. He always does when Dad disappears. He'll act concerned, but all he wants is whatever money I've managed to save. The protective instinct that had sparked earlier at the bus stop grew stronger in Cade's chest. But alongside it was a deep frustration, at Clara's father, at Uncle Tom, at himself for not knowing about her sooner. He could have helped her years ago, if he'd only known. Morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen windows, casting warm patches on the wooden table where Clara sat, with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee. The aroma filled the small kitchen, mixing with the scent of toast and eggs that Cade had prepared. "These eggs are good," Clara said, carefully bringing another forkful to her mouth. Her movements were precise, practiced from years of adapting to her blindness. "But you really didn't have to go to all this trouble." Cade grunted softly, pushing his own eggs around his plate. "No trouble." "I appreciate everything you've done," Clara continued, her voice firm despite its softness. "But I can take care of myself. I've been doing it for years now." She set her fork down and straightened her shoulders. "I should probably call a cab and head home." Cade watched her for a moment, noting the tension in her jaw, the way her fingers tightened around the coffee mug. "Before you do that," he said, clearing his throat, "would you like to take a walk? Got a decent-sized yard out back? Morning air's nice." Clara hesitated, her expression uncertain. "I don't want to impose." "Not imposing if I'm offering," Cade replied, his gruff voice gentler than usual. "Besides, might help clear your head after everything that happened yesterday." After a moment's consideration, Clara nodded. "All right, a short walk." Cade stood and moved to her side, waiting as she gathered her cane. "Ground's a bit uneven," he warned. "Can take my arm if you want." Clara reached out hesitantly, her fingers finding his sleeve. Together they made their way through the back door onto a wooden deck. The morning air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of grass and nearby pine trees. "3 steps down," Cade guided her carefully. "That's it." Their shoes crunched on gravel as they walked slowly along the path. Birds chirped in the trees overhead, and a light breeze rustled the leaves. Clara's cane swept back and forth in a steady rhythm as they walked. "There's a garden to your left," Cade said. "Nothing fancy, just some vegetables and herbs. Tomatoes are coming in nice." "You garden?" Clara asked, surprise evident in her voice. "Yeah, helps keep my hands busy. Keeps the mind quiet, too." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, before Clara spoke again. "It's peaceful here, different from the city." "That's why I chose it," Cade replied. After I changed my life, I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere I could start fresh." They reached a wooden bench, and Cade described its location to Clara. She sat down, her cane resting across her lap. The morning sun warmed their faces as they sat together. "Clara," Cade said after a while, his voice serious, "I know you can take care of yourself. but everyone needs help sometimes. He turned slightly toward her. I want to help you get your life back on track. Whatever that means, a new place to live, work, dealing with your father and Uncle Tom, I'll help you figure it out. Clara's fingers tightened around her cane. Why would you do that? You barely know me. Because it's the right thing to do, Cade replied simply. And because I made promises too. Promises I didn't keep. Maybe this is a chance to make things right. Clara sat quietly for a long moment, her face tilted toward the sun. Finally, she nodded slowly, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. For the first time since her father had left her at that bus stop, she felt something she'd almost forgotten. Hope. The peaceful morning shattered with 3 sharp knocks on Cade's front door. Clara stiffened at the sound, her hands gripping her cane tightly. Something about those knocks made the air feel heavy with tension. Stay here, Cade said quietly, rising from the bench. His boots crunched on the gravel as he made his way to the front of the house. When he opened the door, he found himself face to face with a man who looked like he'd slept in his clothes. The stranger's bloodshot eyes and unshaven face told a story of hard living, and the smell of stale alcohol clung to him like a cloud. Where is she? The man demanded, trying to peer around Cade's broad frame. I know Clara's here. Followed the cab that picked her up last night. Cade's jaw tightened. You must be Uncle Tom. That's right, Tom sneered, puffing up his chest despite being shorter than Cade. And I need to talk to my niece. Family business, you understand? Behind them, Clara's cane tapped against the wooden deck as she made her way toward the door. I can hear you, Uncle Tom, she called out, her voice steady despite the slight tremor in her hands. Clara, honey. Tom's voice switched to a wheedling tone that made Cade's skin crawl. Thank goodness you're safe. I've been so worried about you. No, you haven't, Clara replied flatly. What do you want? Tom shuffled his feet, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. Well, since you're asking, I got this notice from the bank. They're going to take my car if I don't make the payment by Friday. I just need a little help, sweetheart. You know I'd do the same for you. Like you did when I needed help after Dad left? Clara's voice was sharp with hurt. Or when I needed someone to drive me to my doctor's appointments. That's not fair, Tom protested, his face reddening. I was going through a rough patch then, but I'm your uncle, your only family left. You can't turn your back on family. Cade watched as Clara's fingers tightened around her cane until her knuckles turned white. I'm not giving you any money, Uncle Tom. Not this time. Not ever again. Tom's face transformed, the fake concern melting into ugly anger. After everything I've done for you, you ungrateful little... He took a step forward, but Cade moved to block his path, drawing himself up to his full height. That's enough, Cade growled, his voice low and dangerous. Time for you to leave. Who do you think you are? Tom spat, jabbing a finger at Cade's chest. You don't know anything about us. This is family business. I said leave, Cade repeated, his tattooed arms folding across his chest. Tom backed away, his face twisted with rage. This isn't over, Clara. You hear me? You can't hide behind this thug forever. I'll be back, and you'll remember who your real family is. The threat hung in the air as Tom stumbled down the front steps and away from the house. Clara stood frozen in the doorway, her face pale, all the confidence from their morning walk stripped away. Cade watched Tom's retreating figure, his fists clenched at his sides, wondering if his presence in Clara's life would be enough to keep her safe from the vultures of her past. The bell above the door chimed as Cade held it open for Clara. The scent of fresh coffee and old books filled the air at Morton's Books and Brew, a cozy store tucked between a bakery and an antique shop. Clara's cane swept in small arcs as she stepped inside, her shoulders tense with anticipation. "Smells nice in here," she said softly, taking a deep breath. "Morning, Sarah," Cade called out to the store owner, a woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and kind eyes. "This is Clara, the one I told you about." Sarah Morton walked around the counter, her sensible shoes making soft clicks against the hardwood floor. "Clara, welcome. I'm so glad to meet you." Her voice was warm and gentle, putting Clara at ease almost immediately. "Thank you for having me," Clara replied, extending her hand. Sarah took it without hesitation, giving it a firm shake. "Cade tells me you're good with organization and have an excellent memory," Sarah said. "Those are exactly the skills we need here." Clara nodded, her fingers fidgeting with the strap of her shoulder bag. "I do my best to stay organized. It helps me keep track of things." "Well, let me introduce you to the team." Sarah gestured to a young man arranging books on a nearby shelf. "That's Marcus, our resident expert on science fiction and fantasy." "Hey there," Marcus called out cheerfully. "Welcome aboard." "And over by the coffee bar is Jenny," Sarah continued. "She makes the best lattes in town." Jenny waved from behind the espresso machine. "Nice to meet you, Clara. I'll teach you how to work the register later. It's all touchscreen with voice commands." Clara's face brightened at this information. "Really? That's wonderful." Sarah placed a gentle hand on Clara's arm. "We've set up a workstation for you near the information desk. Everything is labeled in Braille, and we've organized the sections so they're easy to navigate." Cade watched as Sarah led Clara around the store, showing her where everything was located. He noticed how Sarah would occasionally guide Clara's hand to different surfaces, letting her feel the layout of the space. The care and consideration in Sarah's actions made his chest tight with gratitude. "The audiobook section is right here," Sarah explained, leading Clara to a corner of the store. "You'll be in charge of keeping it organized and helping customers find what they need. We get a lot of elderly customers who prefer audiobooks." Clara ran her fingers over the shelves, already memorizing their arrangement. "I can do that," she said with growing confidence. As Sarah continued the tour, Cade moved to lean against a bookshelf, watching Clara take her first steps toward independence. She looked different already, her shoulders straighter, her movements more assured. An hour later, Clara was behind the information desk, wearing the store's navy blue apron. Her fingers moved confidently across the Braille labels as she sorted through a stack of new audiobook arrivals. A customer approached, and Cade held his breath. But Clara handled the interaction with ease, her voice clear and professional, as she helped the elderly woman find a mystery novel. From his spot near the window, Cade watched Clara work. Pride swelled in his chest at how quickly she was adapting, but worry still gnawed at the edges of his mind. He knew this job was just the beginning. Clara had a long road ahead of her. Still, seeing her smile as she successfully helped another customer gave him hope. Clara stood straighter behind the desk, her hands moving surely over her workspace, beginning to find her place in this new chapter of her life. The morning rush had settled into a quiet lull at Morton's Books and Brew. Clara stood behind the information desk, her fingers tracing the Braille labels with growing familiarity. The soft murmur of customers browsing the shelves and the gentle hiss of the espresso machine created a peaceful atmosphere. A sharp voice cut through the tranquility. "Excuse me, I need help finding a book." "Of course," Clara said, turning toward the voice with a welcoming smile. "What can I help you find?" "It's right there on that shelf," the woman said, her tone impatient. "Can't you see it? The blue one with the silver lettering." Clara's smile faltered slightly. "I apologize, ma'am, but I'm blind. If you could tell me the title or author, I'd be happy to help you locate it." "Blind?" the woman scoffed. "Why would they hire someone blind to work in a bookstore? That's ridiculous. How can you possibly help customers?" The woman's words hung heavy in the air. Other customers turned to stare, and Clara felt her cheeks grow hot. Her fingers gripped the edge of the desk, but she kept her voice steady. "Ma'am, I know this store's inventory very well. I may not be able to see the books, but I can direct you to exactly what you're looking for if you'll just tell me the title." "This is absurd," the woman muttered. "I want to speak to a manager." Sarah, who had been watching the exchange from nearby, stepped forward. "I'm the owner. Is there a problem?" "Yes, there's a problem. How do you expect someone who can't see to work in a bookstore?" Clara straightened her shoulders. "Ma'am, while I appreciate your concern, I'm perfectly capable of doing my job. Our audiobook section is one of the best organized in the city, and I can help you find any book if you'll just give me the information I need." The woman opened her mouth to argue further, but Sarah cut her off. "Clara is one of our most valuable employees. If you're uncomfortable with that, you're welcome to shop elsewhere." The woman huffed and stormed out, the bell above the door jingling angrily in her wake. Clara's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her apron. Several customers approached to offer kind words, but their sympathy, though well-meaning, made her feel even more exposed. The rest of her shift passed in a blur. Clara threw herself into her work, organizing shelves and helping customers with mechanical precision, but the woman's words echoed in her mind. As closing time approached, Clara heard familiar heavy footsteps. The scent of leather and motor oil told her Cade had arrived to walk her home. "Rough day?" he asked quietly, noticing her tense posture. Clara's shoulders slumped. "Sarah told you about what happened?" "Yeah, she did." Cade's voice was gentle. "You handled it well." "Did I?" Clara's voice wavered. "Sometimes I wonder if that woman was right. Maybe I'm fooling myself thinking I can do this." "Hey," Cade said firmly. "You helped 12 customers today. I counted. One bad apple doesn't spoil the whole bunch." Clara managed a small smile. "You were watching?" "Just keeping an eye out. But you didn't need me. You stood your ground all on your own." Clara gathered her things, feeling both proud and completely drained. "It's harder than I thought it would be," she admitted. "Being out here, away from—" She hesitated. "Away from the safety of your house." "But you're doing it anyway," Cade said. "That's what counts." Clara nodded, gripping her cane tightly. She wasn't sure if she was ready for all this independence, but she knew she had to try. The afternoon sun warmed their faces as Cade and Clara walked through his backyard. The grass crunched beneath their feet, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. "There's a small step here," Cade said, his voice gentle but matter-of-fact. "About 3 inches up." Clara tapped her cane forward, finding the edge. "How many steps to the garden bench?" 4 more. Cade walked beside her, close enough to help if needed, but far enough to let her move independently. "Try counting them out." Clara nodded, concentrating. 1 tap, 1 step, 2 taps, 2 steps. Her confidence grew with each movement. When she reached the bench, a smile spread across her face. "I did it!" "You're getting better at this," Cade said, settling beside her. "Want to try something new?" "What do you have in mind?" "I noticed you struggle with your coffee mug sometimes." Cade pulled something from his pocket. "Here, feel this." He placed a small device in her hand. Clara's fingers explored it carefully. "What is it?" "It's a liquid level indicator. Hangs on the edge of your mug. Beeps when the liquid gets close to the top." Cade's voice held a hint of pride. "Found it online last week." Clara's fingers trembled slightly as she held the device. "You bought this for me?" "Figured it might help." Cade cleared his throat, suddenly self-conscious. "There's other stuff too. Been reading up on it." They spent the next hour practicing with the liquid indicator, Cade patiently explaining how it worked. Clara's delight at successfully pouring her own drink without spilling made his heart warm. As the afternoon wore on, they sat in comfortable silence on the bench. The rhythmic chirping of birds filled the air. "Why are you doing all this?" Clara's voice was barely above a whisper. "Doing what?" "Teaching me, helping me, buying things to make my life easier." Clara's hands twisted in her lap. "Nobody's ever... after Mom died..." Her voice cracked, and Cade waited quietly, giving her space to find her words. "Do you know what it's like?" she continued. "To wake up every morning knowing you're completely alone?" "Dad, he tried at first, but the drinking got worse. And Uncle Tom..." She shuddered. "He only showed up when he needed money. Everyone else, they either pitied me or couldn't handle being around someone blind." Cade listened, his heart heavy as Clara's pain poured out. "The worst part isn't even the blindness," she said. "It's the loneliness. Going days without anyone to talk to, wondering if anyone would notice if something happened to me." Her voice shook. "Sometimes I'd sit in my apartment and just talk out loud, just to hear a human voice." Tears rolled down her cheeks. Cade reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and placed his hand over hers. "I got so used to being alone," Clara whispered. "I convinced myself I preferred it. But then you showed up at that bus stop and..." She wiped her eyes with her free hand. "I keep waiting for you to leave too. Everyone always does." Cade squeezed her hand gently, surprised by how much her words affected him. The tough exterior he'd maintained for so long felt paper-thin in the face of her raw honesty. He hadn't expected to care this much, hadn't planned on letting anyone into his carefully constructed solitude. Yet here he was, his heart aching for this brave, wounded woman who'd somehow worked her way past his defenses. The peaceful afternoon shattered with the sound of tires screeching on gravel. Clara's body tensed at the familiar rumble of Uncle Tom's old truck. "He's back," she whispered, her fingers gripping the bench until her knuckles turned white. Heavy footsteps approached, accompanied by the smell of cheap whiskey. "There you are," Uncle Tom slurred, his voice cutting through the garden's tranquility. "Been looking all over for you, Clara." Cade stood, positioning himself between Clara and her uncle. "You're not welcome here. This ain't about you, tough guy." Uncle Tom swayed slightly, jabbing a finger in Clara's direction. "I need money, Clara. Your daddy's gone, and I'm the only family you got left." Clara's voice trembled, but held firm. "No, I won't. Give you any more money?" "You ungrateful little..." Uncle Tom took a menacing step forward. "After everything I've done for you? Who was there when your daddy walked out? Who checked on you?" "Checked on me?" Clara stood, her hands shaking but her chin held high. "You only came around when you needed money. You took advantage of me being blind, stealing from my purse when you thought I wouldn't notice." Uncle Tom's face twisted with rage. "You watch your mouth, girl. You think you're better than me now? Living here with your new protector?" He lurched forward, causing Clara to stumble backward. "I'll show you what happens to ungrateful..." Cade moved like lightning, his large frame blocking Uncle Tom's path. "Take one more step," he growled, "and it'll be your last." "Oh, look who's playing hero," Uncle Tom sneered, though he took a step back. "The ex-gang member with a heart of gold. You think you can protect her? You're nothing but a washed-up criminal." "At least I'm not preying on blind women for drug money." Cade's voice was deadly calm. "Leave. Now. And don't come back." "Or what?" Uncle Tom's eyes narrowed. "You gonna beat me up? Show Clara what kind of man you really are? Once a violent thug, always a violent thug." Cade's fists clenched at his sides, his tattoos rippling as his muscles tensed. The old rage burned in his chest, begging to be released. It would be so easy to shut Uncle Tom up with his fists, to make him feel the pain he'd caused Clara. But then he heard Clara's sharp intake of breath behind him, felt her hand touch his arm. The touch anchored him, reminded him of who he was trying to be. "Get off my property," Cade said, his voice leveled despite the anger coursing through him. "If you ever come near Clara again, I won't be so nice. And trust me, I've got friends in this town who'd love to hear about how you treat your blind niece." Uncle Tom's face paled slightly at the implied threat. He backed away, pointing a shaky finger at Clara. "This ain't over. You think you're better than your old uncle? You're nothing but a burden. Always have been, always will be." His truck door slammed, and the engine roared to life. Gravel sprayed as he peeled out of the driveway, leaving behind a cloud of dust and the heavy weight of his words. Clara's legs gave out, and she sank back onto the bench. Her whole body trembled. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'm so sorry he brought you into this." Cade sat beside her, his own hands shaking with suppressed rage. The confrontation had brought back memories he'd rather forget. The fights, the violence, the person he used to be. Uncle Tom's words echoed in his head. Once a violent thug, always a violent thug. They sat in silence, both rattled by the encounter, while the peaceful garden around them seemed to mock their turmoil. The screen door slammed behind Cade as he stormed into the house. His hands were still shaking, and the muscle in his jaw twitched. Clara followed him inside, her cane tapping against the wooden floor. "I can't do this anymore." Cade's voice was rough with emotion. He paced the kitchen, running his hands through his hair. "I'm not cut out for this, Clara. I almost lost it out there." "You didn't, though," Clara said softly. "You kept your cool." "Barely." Cade slammed his palm against the counter, making Clara jump. "You didn't see how close I was to—" He cut himself off, disgusted with himself. "Uncle Tom was right. I'm just a washed-up thug. I can't protect you. I'll probably end up making things worse." Clara's fingers tightened around her cane. "I never asked you to protect me," she said, her voice growing cold. "I've taken care of myself for years. I don't need a savior, Cade." "Yeah." Cade laughed bitterly. "Is that what you call it? Living in fear of that drunk showing up? Getting abandoned at bus stops?" The moment the words left his mouth, he knew he'd gone too far. Clara's face went white, then red with anger. "How dare you?" she whispered. "You think I don't know how pathetic my life is? You think I need you to point it out?" Her voice rose with each word. "I never asked for your help. I never asked for your pity." "It's not pity." "Then what is it?" Clara demanded. "Guilt? Because you knew my father? Because of some connection to your mother's locket? I won't be your redemption project, Cade. I won't be the broken thing you try to fix to make yourself feel better." Cade felt like she'd slapped him. Every word hit home, exposing truths he hadn't wanted to face. "That's not what this is," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I think it is." Clara's chin trembled, but her voice stayed firm. "And I can't do it anymore either. I can't keep wondering when you'll get tired of playing hero and leave. Everyone always leaves." "Clara, no." She held up her hand. "I appreciate everything you've done, but this isn't working. I'm just bringing chaos into your life, and you're—" She swallowed hard. "You're bringing up hopes I can't afford to have." The silence that followed was deafening. Cade stared at her, seeing for the first time how much pain she was in, pain he'd only added to with his outburst. "Maybe you're right," he said finally, his voice hollow. "Maybe I'm fooling myself thinking I could help anyone." He grabbed his jacket from the hook by the door. "I'll be back later. I need some air." But as he rode through town on his motorcycle, the wind whipping past him. Cade knew he wouldn't be going back. Clara was better off without him. Everyone was better off without him. He'd pack his bags tonight and be gone by morning. It was what he did best, running when things got tough. The thought of leaving her made his chest ache, but he pushed the feeling down. He'd tried to be something he wasn't, a protector, a friend, maybe even family. But Uncle Tom had been right. Once a violent thug, always a violent thug. And Clara deserved better than that. The bedroom was dark, except for a single lamp casting shadows on the wall. Cade stood before his open dresser, mechanically folding shirts and stuffing them into his old duffel bag. His movements were slow, heavy with the weight of his decision. His hands paused on a faded black t-shirt, one his mother had given him years ago. The fabric was worn thin from countless washes, but he'd never been able to throw it away. Just like the memory of her smile, her unwavering faith in him, even when he'd given her every reason to give up. "Family is everything, Cade," she used to say, her fingers gentle as they combed through his hair. "When the whole world turns its back on you, family stands strong." Cade sank onto the edge of his bed, the shirt clutched in his hands. What would his mother think of him now? Running away again, just like he always did when things got tough. He'd run from home after she died, run from responsibilities, run from anyone who tried to get close. The memory of Clara's face flashed through his mind, her determined expression when she started her new job, the way her smile lit up her whole face when she succeeded at something new. She'd been abandoned by everyone who should have protected her, yet she kept fighting. And here he was, proving her right about people always leaving. A soft knock on his door made him jump. "Cade?" Clara's voice was hesitant. "Can I come in?" He cleared his throat. "Yeah." Clara entered slowly, her cane tapping against the floor. She stopped a few feet from him, her head tilted slightly. "You're packing." It wasn't a question. Cade wondered how she knew. Maybe she could hear the rustle of clothes, smell the musty scent of his old duffel bag. "I think it's for the best." "For who?" Her voice was sharp. "For you? Or for me?" "Clara, no." She took a step forward, her free hand reaching out until it found his bedpost. "You don't get to make this decision for me. You don't get to decide what's best for me." "I'm trying to protect you," Cade said, his voice rough. "By leaving?" Clara's laugh was bitter. "That's not protection, Cade. That's cowardice." The word hit him like a physical blow. He started to protest, but Clara wasn't finished. "You think I don't know what you're doing? Running away because you're scared? Because it's easier than staying and fighting?" Her voice softened. "I'm scared too, every single day. But I'm tired of being alone." "You deserve better than what? Than someone who actually cares about me? Someone who sees me as more than just a blind girl who needs help?" Clara's voice cracked. "You're the first person since my mother died who's made me feel like I'm not alone. Please don't take that away." Cade stared at her, standing there with her chin raised defiantly, tears streaming down her face. In that moment, she reminded him so much of his mother, that same strength, that same unwavering belief in the good in people, even when they couldn't see it themselves. "I'm not alone when I'm with you, either," he admitted quietly. Clara's hand found his shoulder, squeezing gently. "Then stay. Stay and fight with me." Cade looked down at the t-shirt in his hands, his mother's words echoing in his mind. Family is everything. Maybe it was time to stop running and start fighting. Not with his fists, but with his heart. The morning sunlight streamed through the kitchen window as Cade stood at the counter, his hands wrapped around a steaming cup of coffee. The duffel bag that had been packed last night now sat empty in his closet, a silent reminder of what he'd almost done. Clara sat at the kitchen table, her fingers tracing the rim of her own coffee mug. The tension between them felt thick enough to cut with a knife. "I'm sorry," Cade said finally, his voice rough with emotion. "I was wrong to think leaving was the answer." Clara's fingers stilled on her mug. "You were going to abandon me, just like everyone else." The hurt in her voice made Cade's chest ache. He moved to sit across from her at the table. "I know. I convinced myself I was protecting you, but really—" He took a deep breath. "I was protecting myself. Running away is what I've always done when things get hard." "And what's changed now?" Clara asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "I realized something last night. My mother always said family is everything, and whether we like it or not, we're connected. Not just through that locket you wear, but through something bigger." Cade reached across the table, hesitating before gently touching her hand. "I want to be here, Clara. I want to help you build the life you deserve." Clara pulled her hand away, wrapping her arms around herself. "I don't know if I can trust that. Everyone who's ever promised to stay has left. My father, my mother, though not by choice, even the people who were supposed to care for me." Her voice cracked. "How do I know you won't change your mind again?" "You don't," Cade admitted honestly. "I can't prove it with words, but I can show you through actions. I'm not going anywhere, Clara. No matter how hard things get, no matter what Uncle Tom or anyone else throws at us. What if you get tired of helping me?" Clara's voice was small. "What if I'm too much work?" "You're not work," Cade said firmly. "You're family, and family doesn't give up on each other." Clara's lower lip trembled. "I want to believe you." "Then let me prove it to you." Cade leaned forward. "I've been thinking about ways to help you become more independent. Not because I want to get rid of you, but because I want you to feel secure, no matter what happens." "What do you mean?" "We could look into programs that help blind people live independently. Get you your own place when you're ready, help you learn to navigate the town better." Cade's voice grew stronger as he spoke. "I'll be there every step of the way, but on your terms. You call the shots." Clara was quiet for a long moment, her fingers finding the locket around her neck. "You'd do that for me?" "Yes," Cade said without hesitation. "Even if it means facing things from my past I'd rather forget. Even if it means standing up to people who might try to hurt you. I'm not running anymore, Clara." A tear slipped down Clara's cheek. "I'm scared to hope," she whispered. "I know." Cade's voice was gentle. "But you don't have to face that fear alone. Not anymore." Clara nodded slowly, her hand reaching across the table. This time, when Cade took it, she didn't pull away. Cade stood in his driveway, keys jingling in his hand as he looked back at Clara, who stood in the doorway of his house. The morning sun cast long shadows across the ground between them. "You sure you'll be okay here by yourself?" he asked, his gruff voice masking his concern. Clara nodded, gripping her cane tightly. "I need to learn to be independent, remember? Besides, this is something you need to do." "I'll be back before dark," Cade promised. "There's food in the fridge and you have my number on speed dial." "Go," Clara said softly. "Make peace with your past." The motorcycle roared to life, and Cade headed into town. His first stop was the nursing home where his Aunt Martha lived. He hadn't seen her since his mother's funeral 15 years ago. The antiseptic smell hit him as he walked through the automatic doors. Martha's eyes widened when she saw him. "Cade? Is that really you?" He sat beside her wheelchair, his large frame making the plastic chair creak. "Hey, Aunt Martha. I'm sorry it's been so long." "You look just like your daddy," she said, reaching out to touch his bearded face. "But you have your mama's eyes." "I messed up, Aunt Martha," Cade admitted, his voice thick. After Mom died, I ran. Joined that motorcycle gang, caused nothing but trouble. Martha's weathered hand found his. Your mama would be proud of who you're becoming now, though. That's what matters. Next, he visited his old high school friend, Mike, who now owned the local hardware store. The bell above the door chimed as he entered. Mike looked up from the register, freezing when he recognized Cade. Well, I'll be damned. Hey, Mike. Cade shifted uncomfortably. I owe you an apology. That night when the gang trashed your father's store, I should have stopped them. Should have done something. Mike was quiet for a long moment. That was a lifetime ago, Cade. Still, I'm sorry. They talked for an hour, catching up on lost years. When Cade left, Mike's handshake was firm and genuine. His last stop was the hardest, the cemetery. He hadn't visited his mother's grave since the funeral. The headstone was weather-worn but well-maintained. Someone had left fresh flowers recently. Cade knelt in the grass, touching the cold stone. Hey, Mom. I know I haven't been here. I was ashamed, scared of facing what I'd become. He took a shaky breath. But I'm trying to do better now. There's this girl, Clara. She needs help, and I think maybe helping her is helping me, too. The afternoon sun warmed his back as he told his mother everything. About Clara, about the locket, about his hopes and fears. When he finally stood, his knees were stiff, but his heart felt lighter. Back at home, Clara was waiting on the porch, having heard his motorcycle approaching. How did it go? She asked as he climbed the steps. It was hard, he admitted, sitting beside her. But good. I apologized to some people I'd wronged, visited my mom's grave. And I realized something. It's never too late to change, Clara, to make things right. He turned toward her. I spent years running from my mistakes, thinking I was too far gone to fix anything. But that's not true. Clara reached out, finding his arm. Did it help, facing your past? Yeah, Cade said softly. It did. Made me realize redemption isn't about erasing what happened. It's about choosing to be better, day by day. The evening started peacefully enough. Clara sat at Cade's kitchen table, her fingers moving across the pages of a Braille book while Cade prepared dinner. The smell of cooking pasta filled the air, and Clara smiled at the domestic sounds of pots clanking and water boiling. The peaceful moment shattered when heavy fists pounded on the front door. Clara! Uncle Tom's voice boomed from outside, slurred and angry. I know you're in there! Clara's book fell from her trembling hands. Cade moved quickly to her side, placing a protective hand on her shoulder. Stay here, he whispered. No, Clara grabbed his arm. Don't leave me alone. The pounding continued, each thud making Clara flinch. You think you can just forget about family? Uncle Tom shouted. After everything I've done for you? Cade helped Clara to her feet, keeping her close as they moved away from the door. The wooden frame shuddered as Uncle Tom threw his weight against it. I've got nothing left, he screamed. And it's your fault. You owe me. There was a sharp crack as something hit one of the front windows. Glass shattered, and Clara let out a startled cry. The sound of breaking glass was followed by the thud of something heavy landing on the floor. A brick lay among the glittering shards. You're dead, both of you. Uncle Tom's voice was closer now, coming through the broken window. You think you're better than me? I'll show you what happens to people who abandon their family. Clara's whole body shook. He's never been this bad before, she whispered, clinging to Cade's arm. Cade felt his old instincts surge, the desire to meet violence with violence, to protect what was his with force. His fists clenched as Uncle Tom continued his tirade, now trying to climb through the broken window. But then he looked at Clara, trembling but brave, and remembered his promise to be better, to break the cycle of violence that had shaped both their lives. "I'm calling the police," he said firmly, pulling out his phone. "What?" Clara's face showed surprise and fear. "But he'll never hurt you again," Cade promised, already dialing. "This ends tonight, but we're doing it the right way." As Cade spoke to the dispatcher, Uncle Tom managed to get halfway through the window. Blood dripped from cuts on his arms where he'd contacted the broken glass, but his face showed only rage. "You ungrateful little—" He started to snarl at Clara, but Cade's voice cut him off. "Police are on their way, Tom," he said calmly, positioning himself between Clara and her uncle. "You've got about 2 minutes to leave before they arrive." Uncle Tom's face twisted with hatred. "You think the cops scare me? I'll kill you both before they get here." But even as he threatened them, sirens could be heard in the distance. Uncle Tom's expression changed from rage to fear as the sound grew closer. Clara stood straighter, her grip on Cade's arm loosening slightly. For the first time, she wasn't cowering from her uncle's threats. The police arrived within minutes, their cars flooding the front yard with red and blue light. They found Uncle Tom still half through the window, too drunk and angry to have made a smart decision about leaving. As the officers led Uncle Tom away in handcuffs, Clara leaned against Cade, relief evident in every line of her body. "You didn't fight him," she said softly. "You could have, but you didn't." "That's not who I want to be anymore," Cade replied, his arms steady around her shoulders. "Violence only leads to more violence. It had to stop somewhere." Clara nodded, and for the first time since Uncle Tom had started threatening her, she felt truly safe. The morning sun streamed through the newly repaired window, casting warm patches of light across Cade's kitchen table. Clara sat with her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of coffee, her fingers tracing the ceramic rim thoughtfully. The police had taken Uncle Tom away 3 days ago, and the silence that followed felt both liberating and terrifying. "I've been thinking," Clara said, her voice soft but determined. "I need to learn how to stand on my own 2 feet." Cade looked up from where he was washing dishes, studying her face. The fear that had haunted her features for so long had begun to fade, replaced by something stronger, hope, maybe, or determination. "What do you have in mind?" he asked, drying his hands on a dish towel. "I want to take classes at the community center," Clara said. "There's a program for visually impaired people. They teach everything from computer skills to advanced mobility training." She paused, fidgeting with her coffee mug. But, Cade prompted gently, pulling out a chair to sit across from her. "But every time I think about going out there, meeting new people, trying new things," her voice trembled slightly, "I get so scared. What if I fail? What if people treat me like I'm helpless? What if—" She stopped, taking a shaky breath. "Hey." Cade reached across the table, his rough hand finding hers. "Those are all normal fears, but you're stronger than you think." Clara's fingers tightened around his. "Am I? Sometimes it feels like I'm just pretending to be brave." "You stood up to Uncle Tom," Cade reminded her. "You've been working at the bookstore. You're already proving how strong you are." "That's different," Clara protested. "At the bookstore, I know where everything is. It's become familiar. But going somewhere new, being around strangers—" She shook her head. "Sometimes I wish I could just stay here forever, where it's safe." Cade understood that feeling all too well. Hadn't he spent years hiding from the world, convinced that isolation was better than risking more pain? "Safety is important," he said carefully. "But so is living." Clara's free hand found her locket, touching it absently, a habit she'd developed when she was nervous. "I know you're right. I don't know how to start." "We'll start small," Cade suggested. I could drive you to the community center tomorrow, just to check it out. No pressure to sign up for anything right away. Oui. Clara's voice held a note of surprise. Of course, Cade said firmly. You don't have to do this alone, Clara. I'll be there every step of the way for as long as you need me. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes. But what about when you get tired of helping me? What about when I become too much of a burden? Stop right there. Cade's voice was gentle but firm. You're not a burden. You're family. And family sticks together. Clara wiped at her eyes, a small smile tugging at her lips. One step at a time? She asked. One step at a time, Cade agreed. We'll figure it out together. And when you're ready to spread your wings a little more, I'll still be right here, cheering you on. Clara nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. For the first time, the future didn't seem quite so daunting. She wasn't alone anymore, and that made all the difference. The late autumn breeze rustled through the trees as Clara stood at the corner of Main Street, her white cane tapping rhythmically against the sidewalk. She'd made this trip to the bookstore dozens of times with Cade, but today was different. Today, she was doing it alone. You've got this, she whispered to herself, counting the steps as she'd practiced. The familiar scent of the coffee shop on the corner told her she was headed in the right direction. 20 steps to the crosswalk, wait for the chirping signal, then cross. Her heart pounded as she made her way across the street, but her movements were steady and confident. The morning crowd parted around her, and she could hear the occasional, "Excuse me," as people noticed her cane. It wasn't so bad, she realized. Not nearly as overwhelming as she'd feared. Back at home, Cade sat in his truck across the street, his hands gripping the steering wheel. He'd promised Clara he wouldn't interfere, but he couldn't help following at a distance, just to make sure she was safe. His chest tightened as he watched her navigate the busy sidewalk. Clara paused at the entrance to the bookstore, her fingers finding the familiar brass handle. A smile spread across her face as she stepped inside, greeted by the warm smell of books and the soft chime of the doorbell. "Good morning, Clara." Sarah, her co-worker, called from behind the counter. "Morning, Sarah," Clara replied, making her way confidently to the break room. She knew every step now, could picture the layout in her mind. The fear that had once paralyzed her had transformed into determination. Later that afternoon, Clara ventured out again, this time to the community center 3 blocks away. She'd memorized the route during her practice walks with Cade, counting the turns and listening for specific sounds, the hardware store's creaky sign, the church bells on the hour, the bustling diner on the corner. Cade watched from his usual spot as Clara navigated the new route. His hands clenched every time someone came too close or when a car horn honked nearby. But Clara didn't flinch. She moved with purpose, her cane sweeping steadily before her. At the community center, Clara found her way to the front desk, signed up for computer classes, and even joined a support group for visually impaired adults. Each small victory built upon the last, growing her confidence day by day. "You're doing amazing," Cade told her that evening as they sat on his porch, the crickets chirping softly in the background. Clara beamed, her face glowing with pride. "I never thought I could do this," she admitted. "Be independent again, but it feels right, you know? Like I'm finally taking control of my life." Cade nodded, even though she couldn't see it. His throat felt tight with emotion. He remembered the frightened woman he'd found at the bus stop, how she'd trembled at the thought of trusting anyone. Now here she was, navigating the world on her own terms. "I still get scared sometimes," Clara continued, her fingers finding her locket. "But it's different now. The fear doesn't control me anymore." Cade watched as she stood up, using her cane to make her way inside for a glass of water. Her movements were sure and steady, a far cry from the hesitant steps she'd taken just months ago. Pride swelled in his chest, mixed with a protective worry he knew would never fully fade. But Clara didn't need his protection anymore, at least not in the same way. She was finding her own strength, one step at a time. The evening settled softly around Cade's small house as he and Clara sat on the weathered porch swing. The gentle creaking of chains matched their slow, peaceful rhythm. A warm cup of tea nestled in Clara's hands, its herbal aroma mixing with the sweet scent of late autumn flowers. "Tell me about your mother," Clara said quietly, her fingers tracing the rim of her mug. "The one who wore this locket before me." Cade shifted in his seat, the wood groaning beneath his weight. His voice, usually gruff, softened as memories washed over him. "She was the kindest person I've ever known. Worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, but still found time to help anyone who needed it." Clara listened intently, picking up the slight tremor in his voice. "She sounds wonderful." "She was." Cade cleared his throat. "Even when I was getting into trouble, running with the wrong crowd, she never gave up on me. Said there was good in everyone, if you just looked hard enough." "She was right about that," Clara said softly, reaching out to touch his arm. Her fingers found the raised edges of his tattoos, tracing them gently. Cade watched her hand move across his skin, marveling at how such a simple touch could carry so much understanding. "After she died, I lost my way completely. Thought I was too far gone to ever come back." "But you did come back," Clara reminded him. "You found your way." "Because of you," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. "Finding you at that bus stop. It was like she was giving me another chance. A chance to be the person she always believed I could be." Clara set her mug aside and turned toward him. "You know what I think? I think you were always that person. You just needed to believe it yourself." The crickets chirped in the gathering dusk as they sat in comfortable silence. Finally, Clara spoke again. "I used to think being blind was the worst thing that could happen to me, but now I realize it taught me to see people differently, to look past the surface and find what's really there." Cade's heart thumped heavily in his chest. "And what do you see in me?" "I see someone who's hurting, just like I was. Someone who's afraid to trust, afraid to love." She paused, her hand finding his. "But I also see someone who's brave enough to try anyway." The words he'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled out. "I never thought I could love anyone again," Cade confessed, his voice barely above a whisper. "After everything I'd done, everything I'd lost, I figured I didn't deserve it." Clara squeezed his hand. "And now?" "Now?" He swallowed hard. "Now I understand what Mom meant about redemption, about forgiveness. You showed me that it's possible to start over, to heal." Clara leaned against his shoulder, and he could feel the warmth of her tears seeping through his shirt. They weren't tears of sadness, though. They were tears of understanding, of shared healing. "We saved each other," she murmured. "Your mother would be proud of that." The porch swing creaked softly as they sat together. 2 broken people who had found wholeness in their shared brokenness. The locket around Clara's neck caught the last rays of sunlight, gleaming like a promise kept. The morning sun filtered through the kitchen window, casting warm patches of light across the wooden table where Clara and Cade sat finishing their breakfast. Clara's fingers kept finding their way to the locket around her neck, touching it thoughtfully as she had done countless times before. "Cade," she said, breaking the comfortable silence. "There's something I want to give you." He looked up from his coffee, noting the serious tone in her voice. "What is it?" Clara's fingers worked at the clasp of the locket. The familiar clicking sound filled the quiet kitchen as she carefully removed it from her neck. She held it in her palm for a moment, her thumb running over its smooth surface one last time. "This locket," she began, her voice soft but steady, "has been a symbol of love and family for generations. First your mother wore it, then mine, and then it came to me." She extended her hand across the table, the gold chain draping between her fingers. "Now it's time for it to come back to you." Cade stared at the locket, his throat tightening. "Clara, I can't. That's yours." "No," she said firmly. "It's meant to be with family, and you're my family now, Cade. You've shown me what that really means." His rough hands remained flat on the table, hesitant to reach for the precious piece of jewelry. "But your mother would be happy knowing it's with someone who understands its true value." Clara smiled, her unseeing eyes bright with emotion. "Someone who knows that family isn't just about blood. It's about choice, about standing by each other, protecting each other." Cade's vision blurred as he watched the morning light catch the gold surface of the locket. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Clara replied. She stood up and walked around the table, her movements confident in the familiar space. Finding his shoulder, she pressed the locket into his palm. "Just promise me you'll remember what it stands for. Love, family, hope." His fingers closed around the warm metal, feeling its weight, not just physical, but emotional. "I promise," he managed, his voice rough with emotion. Clara's hand squeezed his shoulder. "Your mother's legacy lives on through you, Cade. Through the way you've helped me, protected me, believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." Cade stood up slowly, the locket clutched carefully in his hand. "You've done the same for me," he said quietly. "Given me a reason to be better, to live up to what Mom always wanted for me." Clara wrapped her arms around him in a tight hug. "We're family now," she whispered. "No matter what happens, that won't change." Cade held her close, the locket pressed between them. In that moment, he fully understood what his mother had tried to teach him all those years ago. Family wasn't about perfect people or perfect circumstances. It was about perfect love, about choosing to stand by someone through everything life threw at you. With trembling fingers, he fastened the locket around his neck, feeling its familiar weight settle against his chest. It felt right, like coming home after a long journey. In accepting the locket, he was accepting not just the symbol, but the responsibility and joy of being Clara's family, her protector, her anchor in the world. The morning sun continued to stream through the window, warming them both as they stood in their embrace. Two souls who had found their way home through the darkness to create their own kind of family. The late summer breeze rustled through the wind chimes Cade had hung on the front porch. Clara sat in her favorite rocking chair, listening to their gentle tinkling while Cade worked in the garden. The sound of his spade hitting dirt created a steady rhythm that had become familiar and comforting. "Your appointment's at 2 today, right?" Cade called out, pausing his work. "Yes," Clara replied, her fingers tracing the pattern on her coffee mug. "Dr. Sarah wants to talk about the progress I've made with accepting help from others." Cade wiped his hands on his jeans and walked over to the porch. "That's good. My session with Dr. Mike is right after yours. He thinks we're both doing well with the group therapy, too." Clara smiled, remembering their first awkward group session where other families shared similar stories of healing and redemption. "Remember how nervous we were that first day?" "Yeah," Cade chuckled, settling into the chair next to her. "I almost turned the truck around 3 times on the way there." Their new routine had taken shape naturally over the past few weeks. Mornings started with coffee and breakfast together, followed by Clara's work at the bookstore, while Cade tended to his small landscaping business. Thursdays were reserved for therapy, individual sessions followed by group counseling where they met other families working through their own challenges. "The garden's coming along nicely," Clara said, breathing in the scent of fresh soil and growing things. "I can smell the tomatoes ripening." "Should have enough for your famous pasta sauce soon," Cade replied, his voice warm with affection. He'd learned to describe everything he did in detail, painting pictures with words so Clara could share in his activities. Inside, the kitchen timer chimed. "That's the bread," Clara said, standing confidently. She navigated the familiar path to the kitchen, her hands finding the oven mitts exactly where they always were. Cade watched from the doorway as she expertly removed the loaf, setting it on the cooling rack. They'd organized the kitchen together, making sure everything had its place so Clara could move about independently. The pride in her accomplishments showed in her confident movements. "Your turn to pick the music while we make lunch," she said, closing the oven door. Cade walked to their small stereo system and put on some soft jazz, their compromise between his old rock preferences and her classical favorites. As they prepared sandwiches together, their movements were synchronized, comfortable with each other's presence in the shared space. "Dr. Sarah says it's important to celebrate small victories," Clara mentioned, spreading mustard on the bread. "Like how I managed the register alone at work yesterday." "That's not small, Clara," Cade said. "Seriously. That's huge. Just like how I didn't lose my temper when that guy cut me off in traffic yesterday." Clara laughed, reaching out to pat his arm. "Look at us, growing and healing together." They carried their lunch to the porch, settling back into their chairs. The wind chimes continued their gentle song as they ate, occasionally sharing observations about their day or plans for the weekend. "You know," Clara said thoughtfully, "I never thought I'd have this again. A real family." Cade reached over and squeezed her hand. "Me neither. But here we are." The afternoon stretched before them, peaceful and full of promise. They had therapy later, but for now they simply enjoyed each other's company. Two souls who had found healing in their chosen family. Clara stood at the entrance of the community center, her white cane tapping gently against the concrete steps. Her heart raced with nervous energy. Though she'd grown more confident over the past months, this felt different. This was her first time seeking out others like herself. "The door's about 10 feet ahead," Cade said softly beside her. "Want me to walk you in?" Clara shook her head, straightening her shoulders. "No, I need to do this myself. But would you mind waiting here?" "I'll be right outside," he assured her, his deep voice steady and comforting. Clara made her way forward, counting steps in her head. The sound of voices grew louder as she approached the meeting room. Her cane found the doorframe, and she paused, taking a deep breath. "Hello?" she called out, her voice slightly shaky. "Is this the Vision Support Group?" "Yes, come on in," a friendly female voice responded. "I'm Sarah, the group facilitator. Let me help you find a chair." Gentle footsteps approached, and a hand lightly touched her elbow. Clara allowed herself to be guided to an empty seat, listening as Sarah described the room's layout and the circle of chairs where other members sat. "Everyone," Sarah announced, "this is Clara, joining us for the first time." A chorus of warm greetings filled the room. Clara's tension began to ease as people introduced themselves one by one. There was Mike, who'd lost his sight in an accident like her, Jenny, blind since birth, and Thomas, who was gradually losing his vision but maintained his optimism. "Would you like to share your story, Clara?" Sarah asked. "Only if you're comfortable." Clara nodded, surprised to find she actually wanted to talk. "I've been blind since I was young," she began. For a long time, I felt alone, like no one could understand. Her fingers found the locket around her neck, drawing strength from it. But recently, I've learned that family isn't always what we're born into. Sometimes it's what we choose. That resonates with many of us, Jenny said warmly. We all need support systems. As the meeting progressed, Clara found herself drawn into conversations about daily challenges and victories. They shared tips about navigation, cooking, techniques, and technology that could make life easier. Someone mentioned a local art class designed for the visually impaired, and Clara felt a spark of interest she hadn't experienced in years. I used to love drawing, she admitted. I never thought I could do anything artistic again. Oh, you'd love this class, Thomas exclaimed. The instructor is amazing at helping us experience art through touch and texture. By the time the meeting ended, Clara had exchanged phone numbers with several members and made plans to attend the art class with Jenny. Her cheeks hurt from smiling so much. Outside, Cade waited patiently. He heard the laughter and chatter as people left the meeting room, and then Clara's familiar footsteps approaching. How'd it go? He asked, though her beaming face already told him everything. It was wonderful, Clara said, reaching for his arm. I've never met so many people who just get it, who understand without me having to explain everything. She turned to face him, her expression bright with excitement. Jenny invited me to an art class next week. Would you mind driving me? Of course not, Cade replied, his chest swelling with pride as he watched Clara practically bounce with enthusiasm. She was glowing with newfound confidence, chattering about the people she'd met and the stories they'd shared. As they walked to his truck, Cade marveled at how far they'd both come. Clara wasn't just surviving anymore. She was thriving, reaching out to others, building her own community. And he was there to witness it all, supporting her every step of the way. The evening air was cool and crisp as Clara sat on the porch swing of Cade's house, now their shared home. The gentle creaking of the chains matched the rhythm of her swaying. Cade settled beside her, the swing adjusting to his weight with a soft groan. I've been thinking, Clara said, her fingers absently tracing the pattern on her coffee mug. Remember when I mentioned I never finished college? Yeah, Cade replied, his voice gentle in the quiet evening. You were studying literature, weren't you? Clara nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. I was halfway through my degree when... She paused, taking a deep breath. Well, when everything happened with Dad, I had to drop out to work full-time. Cade shifted slightly, turning to face her better. You thinking about going back? I am, Clara admitted, her voice growing stronger with excitement. The community college has a great program for visually impaired students. They have special equipment, audio textbooks, everything I'd need. She hesitated, then added, But I'm scared, Cade. What if I can't handle it? Hey, Cade said softly, placing his calloused hand over hers. Look how far you've come already. That support group, the art classes, you're doing amazing things, Clara. School would just be another adventure. Clara's fingers curled around his, drawing strength from his steady presence. It would mean changes for both of us. I'd need help with transportation, and the costs. Stop right there, Cade interrupted gently. Whatever you need, we'll figure it out together. That's what family does. Tears welled up in Clara's eyes, but they were happy tears. I never thought I'd have this again, she whispered. Someone who believes in me. Well, get used to it, Cade said, his gruff voice softening with affection. You're stuck with me now. Clara laughed, wiping her eyes. The counselor at the college said they have evening classes. I could keep my job at the bookstore during the day. Perfect, Cade nodded. And I can drive you to evening classes after my shift at the garage. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, listening to the crickets chirping in the darkness. Clara tilted her face upward, feeling the cool night air on her skin. "Is it a clear night?" she asked. "Beautiful," Cade replied. "Stars are out everywhere. Moon's almost full." Clara smiled, remembering how the stars looked from when she could see. "Tell me about them?" Cade cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed but willing. "Well, right above us is the Big Dipper. It's bright tonight, shining like your smile when you're really happy." Clara squeezed his hand, touched by his attempt at poetry. Though she couldn't see the stars anymore, she felt their presence, just as she felt Cade's unwavering support beside her. "I'm going to do it," she declared firmly. "I'm going to enroll for the fall semester." "That's my girl," Cade said proudly, his voice thick with emotion. Clara leaned back in the swing, feeling the gentle breeze on her face. For the first time in years, she felt completely at peace. The fear and uncertainty that had plagued her for so long seemed to melt away under the starlit sky. She had found something she never thought possible: a true family, unconditional support, and the courage to dream again. The stars faded as dawn painted the sky in soft pinks and oranges. Cade sat at his kitchen table, holding the gold locket in his weathered hands. The metal was warm from his touch as he traced its familiar pattern with his thumb. Through the window, he could see Clara tending to the small garden they'd started together, her movements confident as she felt her way along the raised plant beds. His mind drifted back to that promise made so long ago. He'd been just a teenager when Clara's mother had pulled him aside one day, her eyes serious despite her gentle smile. "Cade," she'd said, "I need you to promise me something. If anything ever happens, don't let Clara fall. She's going to need someone strong to catch her." At the time, he hadn't understood the weight of those words. He'd made the promise easily, the way young people do, never thinking he'd actually need to keep it. But life had a way of coming full circle. Watching Clara now, her face tilted toward the morning sun as she worked, Cade felt a deep sense of peace. The promise he'd made had seemed impossible when he first found her at that bus stop. How could someone like him, broken, haunted by his past, be strong enough to catch anyone? But Clara had shown him that strength wasn't about being perfect. It was about showing up, day after day, even when things got hard. He thought about their journey together. The nights when Clara's nightmares had torn her from sleep. When she'd fought against accepting help. When she'd pushed him away out of fear. He remembered his own moments of doubt, the times he'd nearly given up, convinced he wasn't good enough to be anyone's protector. But they'd weathered those storms together. Each small victory, Clara's first solo trip to the bookstore, her decision to join the support group, her growing confidence, had built upon the last. The promise he'd made hadn't just been about keeping Clara safe. It had been about helping her find her own strength, about being there while she learned to fly. Clara's voice called out from the garden, breaking through his thoughts. "Cade, could you help me with these tomato plants?" He carefully placed the locket on the table and stood, making his way outside. The morning air was crisp, carrying the scent of soil and growing things. Clara's hands were dirty from working in the garden, but her smile was radiant as she turned toward the sound of his footsteps. "Ready for our walk?" she asked, brushing the dirt from her hands. "Just let me grab my jacket," he replied, touched by how naturally they'd fallen into their morning routine. Moments later they were walking down their familiar path, Clara's hand tucked securely in his. The neighborhood was quiet, just starting to wake up. Their footsteps fell into an easy rhythm as they walked together. Cade glanced at Clara, noting how different she looked from that frightened woman at the bus stop. She held her head high now, her cane moving confidently before her. She'd grown stronger, braver, more sure of herself. And somehow, in helping her find her way, he'd found his own path, too. Together, they turned onto the main street, heading toward whatever the day might bring. The future stretched out before them, full of possibilities neither of them could have imagined just a year ago. Clara squeezed his hand, and Cade squeezed back, a silent acknowledgement of their shared journey and the promise that had brought them here. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story, and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.